My name is Eric Kerber. I am a staff engineer at Slack. I want to talk to you about doing Bazel for iOS, specifically what I'm calling recipes for success. Insights from not one, but two real-life migrations for iOS teams that use Bazel to build their apps. Like I said, a little bit of background about me, kind of what brought me here. I've done 2 migrations, once as a manager. So I was the director of engineering for the platform team, a mobile platform team at Target. Obviously, they're responsible for team building, managing risk, manager things. And then once as a developer at Slack, where I am today. As an engineer, I am responsible for execution, identifying opportunities, teaching and mentoring, but overall, like actually doing the Bazel migration. Now, what makes 2 teams migrate to Bazel that use Apple? First of all, a bit of background, more speed. iOS apps, the popular ones, the ones near lock screen, they tend to get pretty big, and build speed becomes very important. Remote cache and work avoidance really changes the calculus for doing Apple development at scale. Bazel gives us better tools. If you've done iOS development, Xcode is, to be quite frank, it's a glorified WYSIWYG of a build system. If you grow the size of the code base, if you grow what you do, it becomes simply untenable. And of course, it's predictable. It's really great to use Bazel to reliably build your software no matter where it is. If it's on CI, if it's on a developer machine. From this talk, most of all, what I want you to walk away with is why Bazel for Apple, common themes, why you might choose it if you are on an iOS team, an Apple team, and the thought of Bazel has come across your ideas. The challenges you face. Now, the community has made tremendous progress in easing a lot of the pain points, but the community is still, in its opinion, very nascent stages. So you will find headwinds. And of course, given those headwinds, how do you ensure success? Perspectives on how to best prepare your team, your code for success migrating to Bazel on Apple development. Now we're going to do that. Now I'm going to focus mostly on Slack. That's where I am today. I don't want to speak too much about my time at Target. They're just not my current employer. But I do want to use that experience to get some themes and reflections on what goes well, where trouble lies, and really how to maximize your team's chances for success. All right, so let's go to the beginning. Beginning of specifically Slack. So why did Slack choose Bazel? This all started actually quite a while ago. In 2020, Slack 2020, typical post-growth, large code base in need of an architectural revamp. We had about 50 developers at the time. And of course, 2020, this is actually pre-pandemic, we already had an eye for growth, both in our feature set, our code base, and our developers. We had some challenges. Slowing build times. At the time, clean build is about 6 minutes. Now, this is bad, but not huge. But of course, similar to what I experienced at Target, we really wanted to get ahead of things before they got bad with that eye for growth. CI time was slowing down. CI is, of course, in many cases, a combination of build times and run times for test had grown from 20 to 45 minutes, and we wanted to get that back down to something that really did not block our developers. And kind of on the tooling side, again, if you're an iOS or Apple developer, you deal with these large static project files in Xcode that provide a lot of friction and headwinds to what I would call good architecture. But really, why Bazel? Why do we use Bazel to solve those problems? Similar to other teams that go to Bazel for iOS, is the number one appeal that brings you to Bazel is, of course, the promise of the remote build cache. Bazel was chosen over alternatives, primarily because there were success stories of other iOS teams that had gone to Bazel, that works great for them, and they proved that it can work, and you can successfully ship apps to the App Store using it. I can't emphasize enough, given Apple's ecosystem, how much this meant to both the engineers and the leaders at Slack to know that this can be done successfully and predictably. So, thinking about some of the goals we had in mind, like what did we want to get out of Bazel? Of course, cutting CI time from some community feedback. We set a goal of 30 to 60%. We wanted to cut back on CI capacity. With growing CI times, you have to have more machines to run CI. That comes at cost. And kind of back to the tooling side, back to the static project side of Xcode, we wanted an easy way for developers to make libraries. It's the weirdest thing to think about in iOS, that creating a library has a lot of headwinds, just in the tooling to make them, to delete them, to move them around, to change around your dependency edges. And with Starlark, that made things a lot easier, or we hoped it would make things a lot easier. But of course, it's not without risks. Despite the stories of others in the community who have gone through the migration, we still had the idea of like the Apple risk. Apple is still a quote unquote closed ecosystem. We were always afraid of a breaking change from Apple that would make our builds undoable with Bazel. We had a talent risk. Not just that we didn't know Bazel yet, but nobody in our team really had the foundational knowledge of Apple build tools in the compilation process. With Xcode, like, you typically don't need to know a lot of those details because it's all handled for you. And maybe most importantly at all, the developer experience. Developers are used to Xcode, they're used to Apple tools. If we swap out the build system under them, what kind of developer experience can we provide? And will developers enjoy it? So my first kind of takeaway here, my first recipe, you might call it, is a developer-oriented one, hence the headphones here. Get excited, really, but manage expectations. It will take hard work. The tools are awesome. Your CI will speed up. Your build times will decrease, but it's not magic. It's not going to happen overnight. And the speed doesn't come just because you used a build system with caching. It's because it has to work in concert with your architecture. And your build graph are going to factor a lot into what developers and your CI experience as a speed change. All right, so let's get into some details of Slack's journey here. So talk about bootstrapping Bazel at Slack. Kind of back to the Apple problem, we wanted to manage risk. The way we would do this is keeping a hot fallback. We wanted to do Bazel in tandem with Xcode build for as long as we felt comfortable with it, just in case something we didn't know about might happen. We wanted to build Bazel and Xcode build on CI, again, prevent regressions from either. And we wanted to, at least for the immediate and medium term, keep using Xcode build for local development. A lot of tooling depends, or I wouldn't say depends, but a lot of tooling is difficult to work with Bazel in iOS development, notably around debugging tools inside Xcode integrations. How did we do Xcode build and Bazel at the same time? A key part of our early strategy is actually 2 Xcode projects or project generators. One we called XBB, Xcode build binary, is a generated project that actually you would use Bazel build graph combined with a custom aspect to generate a real live Xcode project that once it was generated, just forgot about the Bazel. So using that aspect, we could get target information, we could get source information, and actually just treat Bazel almost like an input into a classic Xcode build model. And the second project is still Xcode. Xcode is important for developers. We called it Bazel and Xcode. Now this is a generated Xcode project that would swap out Xcode build. If you remember a few years ago, Keith Smiley and Dave Lee gave a talk that kind of gave the foundation theory behind how to do this. And we used something very similar to that in the excellent Rules iOS project generator so that developers could have an Xcode project that would, under the curtains, when they hit Command B, hit the play button, would actually shell out to a Bazel process and build with Bazel in Xcode. So these 6 points here, I kind of want to gloss over just our plan. Now, plans never quite go to plan, but let me go over what we wanted to do. Number 1, first, build something, anything. Build a library, build with Bazel, throw it on CI, make sure it breaks. That's a great, awesome first step, an awesome first win. Second, build all of Slack. Get the whole build graph actually building the Slack app with Bazel. We used Rules iOS because at the time we had a mixed source project with mixed modules of Swift and Objective-C. Rules iOS is a fantastic way to make that easier on your team. Next step, build out XBP. Write that aspect. Take that build graph and generate an Xcode build project. Once you have that, that's a pretty big moment for us. All of a sudden, now our source of truth can be cut over from a static checked-in Xcode project into actually using the Bazel build graph and build files as our source of truth. And from that, we hope that there's an explosion of module creations that would happen to fight against kind of our previous like monolith architecture. Then we want to get Bazel on CI, run Xcode build and Bazel on CI. Now we have the tools to generate both. And last but not least, we actually then wanted to release to the App Store with Bazel, getting those wins for remote caching along the way. Now I said that was our plan. This is a very key kind of few slides here that I think will show how things actually went. We ran into a vicious cycle, right? Project kickoff. Let's build something with Bazel. The Slack code base at the time in 2020 simply wasn't in a great place to easily convert from Xcode build to Bazel. Problems with mixed source, some hacks with how our builds worked and build scripts. We had some bad architecture, flaky tests, Bazel learning curve. It got to the point where we wanted to make progress and then felt, wow, this is actually really hard. This would be so much easier if we had a modularized code base, a fanned out architecture. And how do we do that? Well, it's really hard with Xcode, right? We're still this is like kind of pre-Swift Package Manager being a reasonable solution. We thought, well, if we finish that Bazel migration, then this is easy to re-architect. Okay, vicious cycle here where we ended up pivoting to the most important thing is getting Bazel and getting those speed wins in CI to now the most important thing is we need a way for our developers to better create modules to fight this general pattern that we had early on. Very common of post-growth apps, you see something like this where you have an app, popular app on the App Store, and it's really just one giant blob of a target where your incremental rebuilds are expensive. You might have a few libraries that help you build the software, but they are small and probably not as many as you need. So when you have Bazel building something like this, what's the benefit of remote caching if 90% of the commits are on that big rectangle down low? There are simply very few immediate speed wins. So how did this map out to like how things actually went? This is a timeline of our migration of Bazel for Slack for iOS. Between project kickoff and today, or more likely between project kickoff and the App Store, it was 2 years. Bazel became part of the fabric of our toolchain early. It affected many milestones, right? We got a lot of great wins sort of in the spirit of Bazel ahead of time, but it wasn't until we really completed our architecture migration until we actually got to see those remote build cache wins and everything else great about migrating to Bazel. The point I want to make here is, 2 points. First is every path is different. It was nearly 2 years from project kickoff to Bazel built Slack in the App Store. That's a really long time, right? Addressing technical debt became the dominant theme quickly as we went towards our migration. Your team and project will, of course, have its own journey, which comes to my next recipe. Prepare the way. It's a phrase I got from the Accidental Tech podcast where one of the podcast hosts, John Syracuse, talks about bringing a big Mac Pro into his house, but before he does that, he has to move the furniture and prepare the road and make sure the doors are all propped open. It's very similar like this with some of these projects, is you want to prepare your code base to get into architecture you want it to be in to make that migration successful. If you do them at the same time, you're going to face a lot of friction. Okay. Outside of Bazel specifically, I kind of talk about iOS teams because they're a really important part of using Bazel for iOS. So if you are thinking about Bazel, pretend like this is probably your team, right? A nice, small, talented 1 to 2 pizza team that want to do scalable builds, right? And one, if you're lucky, you might actually know Bazel, right? I'm kidding. No, they won't. Not on an iOS team. And really, honestly, your team probably looks more like this, right? popular iOS apps tend to have a lot of developers. Honestly, your team might even look like this. In fact, a lot of iOS apps would never fit on these slides. They're huge. That's okay. But let's get back to this side. So your team probably has some very experienced iOS developers, right? You might have some newer ones. If you've been in the industry, you know you probably have quite a few that just started learning iOS even a month ago. That's okay. It's a team with all kinds of backgrounds and talents. But surely the team of this size, one person has to know Bazel. No. We iOS developers are a funny bunch. I've been in the industry doing iOS development for about a decade now. iOS development is famously easy to learn. It's notoriously extremely difficult to master. Culturally, you find that developers that do iOS tend to be laser focused on iOS, Swift, and Xcode. All this is to say that the wide T in mobile development is pretty rare. And so if you're going to take on doing build systems, it's tough to go inside your team and find that natural competency to get going really fast. Which brings me to a management perspective. Prepare to invest from within. Today, Bazel iOS is not a common talent. If you're here, at least somebody was excited about Bazel, right? Give them freedom to learn, fail, discover, and make connections. Most importantly, one of the biggest keys is, again, back to this outstanding community in iOS and Bazel. The real key is getting those community connections. That's where a lot of the learning and a lot of the experience can really start to snowball and pay off. Okay, so we talked a bit about the iOS team. Now we're kind of in the middle of a Bazel migration. The developer experience is very important. Kind of going back to this is what your team looks like. This is actually very close to Slack's team. Down to the number, I think I counted it up. I think we had between 55 and 70 developers most of the last 1 to 2 years, give or take, depending on the month. And so we rolled out a tool called the Work CLI. Work CLI is a contract to developers, enabling project setup and common tasks. Importantly, it's a front end for many common Bazel tasks. Now, why Work CLI? That was our stock ticker back when Slack had a stock ticker. I did jokingly suggest maybe we should change it to CRM now that we're part of Salesforce. It just didn't roll off the tongue quite as well. So the work word remains. But if you type this in as the developer, this is more or less what you'll see. Pretty useful. You don't necessarily need to know Bazel. In fact, I'm going to point out the most important one, Go, generate and open the Xcode project, which is essentially what I talked about recently with how we generate XBB and Bazel and Xcode. Type that in. You see some friendly output. We do everything. We make the Bazel call. We even open up Xcode for you. And boom, you're ready to go. Your Xcode opens. Generated opening with almost no need to know or understand Bazel. Now, is that the goal? You can tell from my raising question mark that might have some caveats to it. And we'll get to those later, for sure. Some other highlights. Again, all of these highlighted commands here, these are all Bazel adjacent tasks. They do everything. Calling out this one specifically. This one creates a module for you, which means it makes directories. It actually generates build files, hooks up the depths together, creates shells of unit tests, and even adds labels to the Slack target using Buildozer. Pretty awesome. If you're new to iOS, you're new to Slack, it really helps to get you going from 0 to 100 pretty quick. But maybe that's hiding it a little bit too much, right? We do provide a way to expose some learning to developers with another flag, -D, which simply helps print out exactly what the Work CLI does for developers who want that next step of understanding how to use Bazel, how to work with Bazel without this abstraction above it. Now, this is my next kind of recipe here, and there's a caveat to what I kind of described that we have at Slack today, is embrace progressive disclosure, right? Developers should be able to contribute from day 0 with no prior Bazel experience, but don't hide Bazel. Encourage learning and use all the tools available. And we'll get to more of that later. In retrospect, let me go back a second. I was going to say, in retrospect, looking back, this level of progressive disclosure is probably not enough. Because observation-wise, there are still not a lot of developers who are as comfortable as they could be. And part of it is probably because we have more opportunity to expose to developers how to use Bazel for their iOS development. Okay. One more thing on developer experience, a quick call out to the science of Xcode. So we went through many project generators. We started with XBB, custom built aspect, Rules iOS, excellent for mixed source projects. We went away from Rules iOS just to go to bare Rules Apple and Rules Swift, and because of that, we had to spend a hot minute on Toolsy. And ultimately today, we then migrated to the outstanding Rules Xcode project generator from BuildBuddy. But really, I want to call that out to say that the good news, if you're thinking about doing Bazel for iOS, is that you are in much better shape today, if you start today, than you might have been 2 to 3 years ago. The community's done a fantastic job iterating on project generators and solving a lot of the hard problems that developers had faced in the past. But note to call out that even though we've come a long way in project generators, Xcode problems will become your problems. That's a very important call out. Especially early, developers have little patience and empathy for features in Xcode that don't work and broken experiences. The more you're equipped to answer how and why, the better you will be. So again, my next recipe, demystify it. Spend time, learn it. No matter how far we get, you will run into situations where you need to explain and debug how Xcode works despite using Bazel. All right, I want to go back to iOS teams because I love this topic so much. Former manager, I admit. All right, so you've gone through a Bazel migration. This is your team now with Bazel experts. I'm kidding. Now with an expert in Bazel who knows the setup inside and out. And oh no. Hope you don't laugh too hard at that because this is real. Really important to institutionalize Bazel expertise in your team. Team over individual, common management refrain. Extra important if you take the step to change your build system. Important to remove bottlenecks and minimize risk. So back to an easy recipe. Avoid having a Bazel person. Share tasks, pair program, it's great. Make entire teams own to be accountable for your builds, right? Don't hide Bazel from your practice. Encourage and reward curiosity. This is where I think I would like us to do more to expose Bazel to our team so that it isn't just in a few individuals who are comfortable in the ecosystem. So you're in Slack. You'll use Slack, right? Of course. If your team consistently mentions the same person and you manage a team that does Bazel, you have a problem, right? If you see this, catch it and notice it. Somebody will ask, hey, I want to prototype a new extension, the one I saw at WWDC, and I need the Xcode beta to do it. This is not something developers know how to do. It's not exactly easy for everybody to understand this drill down. And if they're always mentioning Kermit the Frog, because Kermit the Frog loves green, he loves Bazel, man, you're really at risk of Kermit the Frog not being on your team anymore. Really, really focus on this. Make people comment to teams. Make support channels with teams that can help anyone in any situation at least have several ways to unblock themselves and have success in your new Bazel for iOS system. All right, a few comments on the art of rolling out. So this is kind of when you are developing your new tools and acknowledging, again, I just love this view of a team. This is your team, they're here a little bit They're here to build iOS apps. They might be excited about Bazel, but chances are a lot of them might not be. They just want to build iOS apps, and that's great. We want that. So you aspire to make any transition as seamless as possible, but bugs will happen. You want to establish these virtuous cycles. Constant feedback, surveys, interviews, pair with developers, ask them how things are working. When they have a complaint, acknowledge it. Make a plan. A testing group. A small testing group is great, especially if you know those who aren't exactly afraid of a little bit of bugs, a little bit of pain. Find a small group you trust. Give them a direct line of support to you. Thank them. And last of all, do no harm. It's hard to do that. You just don't want to aggress behavior for developers as best as you can. Move them forward, try your best not to move them back. So, especially for engineers, we're telling your developers about these new tools, lead with empathy. This stuff is awesome, but it might hurt for a while during that migration. There will be frustrations. They'll need to learn new concepts and idiosyncrasies, listen to their feedback, address pain points properly. All right, quick little story in remote caching and what you can expect for iOS, or at least how to learn from our learnings. It's back to my schedule here. Timeline of Bazel Slack for iOS. 2 lines. Not gonna lie, this is a little painful. The time between when we kicked off the project and when we had like, I call fully working caches on CI. A lot of it we're learning. Even myself, my first actually executing on Bazel was in Slack, not just leading a team. Our early setup for most of 2020, 2021, defaults are great. We just set Google default credentials and pointed at the GCS bucket. Typical build would look something like this. Build time, 500 seconds, 510 remote cache hit, 630 internal, 481 local, 82 worker. Is that good? I don't know. Cache hits, obvious. We had some faster builds, and Bazel told us it was caching, so awesome. But here's the problem, tests always ran. That was the biggest thing. We, just pointing out a remote build cache, we kind of knew our builds weren't working 100% because if your tests actually run, then obviously something's not getting any cache hit. And of course, things were just still kind of slow. We're seeing those big cache wins. Here's the thing, we just didn't have observability forever. You work in software, you know how important observability can be. It can tell you things you want to know, it can tell you things you didn't know you wanted to know. Simply pointing at GCS was really easy to get started, but things were working well. Debugging by comparing exec logs manually was just tedious. It didn't quite tell the whole story. So enter observability. A quick hat tip to Build Buddy's excellent UI here. It helped us learn a lot of things we didn't know ahead of time. Really silly things like a single problematic file that just did not produce reproducible builds. We had huge uploads, right? So we'd run on CI, we got these cache hits, but we didn't realize it was uploading 10 gigabytes every time. We didn't realize the downloads were 10 gigabytes every time. You don't care how much you cache, you have to download that every time. It's not going to be super fast. Uncacheable actions, really easy to put good observability in place. Those are really easy to spot. Not only that, but it's easy to spot regressions. You only know to look for a problem if you know there's a problem, but sometimes you don't know there's a problem if it's not easy to look. So my next recipe, establish observability early. Know what your cache is doing, and everything else will be a lot easier than what we found it to be. Whether it's something you build or a third party, just make sure you can easily spot cache hits and misses and utilize it early. Manually monitoring your cache is a true Sisyphean task. All right, let's get to the payoff. Bazel awesome, here's us today. Ultra fast CI, even this will be better. Our fastest times are under 2 minutes. We still have some non-Bazel things that just raise that lower end above the 0 mark. Our P50 is 8 minutes. Our P90 is 25 minutes. I think in the few weeks or months, we'll even half those numbers with the help of the remote cache. We're piloting the developer RBC now. It's going pretty great. Developers are seeing morning builds, sub 1 minute, and the tools are awesome. Whole talk for another day is just how easy Starlark and Bazel makes creating modules, configurations. Developer the other day said, I want to get an extension. I want to just play with it, a widget extension. Cool. I just made a flag for him, -- include widget. And that was it. There's no big commit to an Xcode project. There's no huge feature branch has to live forever. This stuff is super powerful. It makes it really easy to do a lot of things that you only dreamed of with Xcode. My last recipe here is get engaged with the community. And all this is possible only because the community has done an amazing work creating the rule sets they have today. Feature or bug, you will need their help. You can't do this just by reading the docs. You will find problems that only other people may have found and can help you with. And of course, pay it forward and help the community grow. Helps us all. Quick recap. Get excited, manage expectations, embrace progressive disclosure, establish observability, prepare the way, invest in your team from within, lead with empathy, avoid having a Bazel person, engage the community, and of course, demystify Xcode. Thank you, everyone, for your time.